Other races to watch and why?
Well, clearly the presidential, and then the legislative races. I mean, this is the year where, especially with the Democratic governor in place, which is different than the past, and she's been doing a lot of fundraising and being very clear that her intention is to try to flip the legislature. We'll be watching some of those very competitive legislative races in the primary, but also in the general.
Are there more competitive races this go around than previous?
No.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more, it's a question of strategy and resources, that if there's going to be a different kind of outcome. For our viewers, the legislature's been stuck at 31 and 29 and 16 and 14 in the House and Senate respectively for 2 election cycles. Mm-hmm. It hasn't changed. So, even with district lines having changed. So I think the difference, if there will be one, will be probably resources and strategy.
Big stories, Jim, this election cycle.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Mary Jo's exactly right. I mean, I think the control of the legislature, that being in the balance, that is not something that we were familiar with in Arizona. Republicans have, with a couple of very rare exceptions, controlled the legislature since the mid-1960s. And so if Democrats are able to take control of one chamber or both, certainly, that changes the dynamics down at the Capitol. That those are probably the most consequential races for everyday Arizonans.
Day-to-day life.
For day-to-day life in Arizona. There's also a couple of congressional seats that are going to be competitive that, Republicans, David Schweikert out of Scottsdale-based district and Juan Ciscomani out of Tucson. Democrats are making hard plays for both of those. Obviously, Republicans hold an extremely narrow majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, and Democrats are hoping to, again, take over control of Congress.
Jen, headlines for this election cycle. What do you see?
It's all about the counties. I think that's what we learned, especially in 2022. We're looking at not only, the Maricopa County Supervisor races. 2 are leaving after, facing all of this drama the last 4 years. This isn't the job they signed up for when it was all about water districts and other boring stuff for county supervisors. So not just in Maricopa, though. In Cochise County and Mojave County, there's important supervisor races going on there. Recorder races. These are also election administrators. That's going to be who's running our elections in 2028, so we have to look at that.
How do you make room for the Corporation Commission and other races out there that are of consequence when all this yelling and screaming and court filings and lawsuits and this, that, and the other, how do you make room for it?
Oh, that's a Jim question. I have no idea. I'm just a reporter, I have no idea.
How do you, we're talking priority again.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is difficult, right? I mean, you do have to kind of decide what are you going to commit to, and some of it is guided by which races seem like they're going to be close, right? Like, are we going to cover race A or race B? Well, race B looks like it might be a closer race, so we're going to cover that instead with our limited staff time and staff resources. But it is important, and I think a lot of it comes down to, some of it's going to come down to planning, just knowing ahead of time. You sit down in this time of year or April and kind of sketch out what do we want to do and when do we want to do it, and how do we kind of devote resources to that, or find a way to free someone up to go cover something.
Talk about the logistics, Mary Jo, of prioritizing and making sure that what you want in there, what you think should be in there, is in there.
Well, you look at, as Jim said, things that are close where there is, there's going to be a lot of attention. I mean, a lot of public interest because things appear to be so close, and the consequences, like the legislature flipping to Democratic, that would be practically historic. So you're going to pay attention to that. And I would say another thing that I'm going to be watching for, if it makes the ballot, is the Make Elections Fair citizen initiative, because that will change how we vote. And that's sort of, that's sort of at the heart of all of this. If we feel that the state is, and the backers of this feel that we've become way too hyper-partisan, they're trying to take that temperature down by going to an open primary and then maybe some kind of ranked choice voting afterwards if you don't get a clear winner from that. And I know I'm making the argument within my publication to spend some time, discussing that and analyzing it and putting it out there, because it is a big change in how it would be a big change in how we conduct our elections.
So I think that's another thing when you talk about resources, right? We're talking about races and candidates. Boy, what are the ballot measures going to look like this year, right? I mean, so we have the Make Elections Fair one. There is a reproductive rights ballot citizen initiative that's out gathering signatures. The legislature is mulling. They've already put a couple things on the ballot. They're mulling dozens more, several dozen, 4 dozen more things that could potentially wind up on the ballot. I mean, in Maricopa County, I think we're already looking at a 2-page ballot.
Yep.
I think we very likely, depending on how many things lawmakers send to the ballot to avoid a veto, we might end up with a 3-page ballot, or God forbid, a 4-page ballot. And it's, those are all things that, again, have to be, we'd love to cover every one of them. We'd love to cover every one of them in great detail, but we're going to have to make those choices in terms of which things are out there and how can we cover everything.
How does Vote Beat approach all of this?
I mean, ballot initiatives, we want to explain to people what these are. If they're election related, we're going to be in there, saying this is, this qualified for the ballot. You're going to see this. You might have an open primary. This means that, you're not going to just see Republicans on, everyone's going to be able to vote, explain the details. Ranked choice voting, that's a big issue that no one's really talking about yet, but it might be coming onto their ballots. So I think we focus really on what's going to be important to voters, and that's where we start.
Yeah, it can be complicated. At your job is to clarify things for voters and for viewers and for our audience here. Make sure we know what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and often you need to repeat a message several times before it sinks in, and there is a tendency to sort of do a one and done on, oh, we've written about this race, we're done, we'll move on, good luck with the judges. Yeah.
The horse race, Jim, the horse race aspect of everything, and the media, looking at polls, looking at who's winning, who's losing, who's catching up, who's falling behind. The media has faced some criticism for a little too much of that. Valid criticism?
I think so. I think tremendously valid. I wrote a couple weeks ago, about how the Arizona Mirror is going to be covering the elections this year. And, our goal is really to not do that horse race coverage, to focus on, I think our motto is really focus on the stakes, not on the odds. We want to focus on what the results of elections are going to mean for people. What do people want their elected officials to do? What are the elected officials saying about that? And then if, candidate A wins or candidate B wins, how is that going to affect people's lives and the policies that are implemented? That, I think, is where the media has really dropped the ball. I think that there's been, over the past generation, we've seen the coverage of elections and government turn into less about policy and less about impact and more about kind of the gamification of everything, of who's winning, who's losing, who's got the edge on this, who's, who sneaked, who pulled off a fast one over here. And that stuff might be tantalizing to voters. And I think that there's, not to voters, but to readers, I think that it attracts eyeballs and clicks and it's a little salacious. But at the end of the day, I don't think that voters walk away from reading those kinds of stories feeling any better about their elections or feeling like they know any more about what's going on in their elections. And I think that we see the result of that, I think, in terms of people's confidence in government and elections.
Interesting.